They're
drama.
trying to sue him out so he'll feel too embarrassed to file his lawsuit against Diddy for what Will and Diddy did to him. With Jaden and Justin present, that tape exists.
So, with regards to what Jaguar Wright has been spilling about Bryshere Gray, I was just digging into the documentary by 50 Cent on Diddy, and I was like, was that even the full story? Or even half of it? I mean, Fifth has been trolling Diddy for years, promising to expose everything. But now that the doc is actually out, people are noticing some massive, gaping holes in the narrative. It's like so many explosive witnesses and specific high-stakes stories just vanished. Was Netflix playing it safe because the legal heat was too much? Or are some names in the industry just too big to touch? Well, allegedly, one story that was meant to make the cut but didn't was how Diddy and co. took advantage of young boys in the industry like Bryshere Gray, and Jaguar Wright has got all the details, all of them.
Was the only issue that I had about what Terrence Howard had to say. Because of all that he talked, he said nothing about Bryshere. He played his television father.
Right.
He was on set. He saw what Charlie Mack and them were doing. He knew they were taking those young boys to Diddy. They all knew.
Okay, before I get into this Bryshere business, apparently there was a lot that was left out of the documentary involving the deaths of Biggie Smalls and Tupac, and I would understand why, considering most of the details are speculative. But allegedly, there was tea in there about how when the incident was going down, rapper Mace was actually trapped in a hotel room surrounded by gang members, and Diddy allegedly hopped on a plane and left Mace behind. Phew. You also probably noticed that Jay-Z didn't quite make the cut, even though there's been a lot that has been said about his ties to Diddy. In fact, there's a Jane Doe who accused both Diddy and Jay-Z of essaying her when she was only 13 years old back in 2000. But y'all remember Jay-Z's team immediately fired back, calling the claims idiotic and fictitious. This story and others involving Jay never made the cut, and it's most likely because they were too legally radioactive for Netflix to include in their final cut. So, people also found it strange that Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, wasn't featured in the doc at all, even though he's the one who has said the most about Diddy for decades, including the infamous allegation that Diddy was responsible for landing Usher in the hospital after you-know-what.
I know, and people know, that was around that in that time that Puff and Usher did have a situation. And that situation led Usher to the hospital. Now, I'll let Usher explain that to y'all. I'll let Usher tell it.
And you know what? These are just some of the things Jaguar also pointed out. She said that the documentary was very sanitary and deliberately left out major industry figures who were present for Diddy's rise, such as Jay-Z and Clive Davis. She also noted the absence of Stevie J in the documentary, despite his close ties to Diddy. According to Jaguar, Diddy is still running the show despite his incarceration, and she said that the documentary was ultimately a strategic move to blame everything on one person while keeping the rest of the industry clean. Now, I don't know for certain why some of these things never met the cut, but if you ask Jaguar Wright, she will tell you that something that should have made the cut was how young men like Bryshere Gray were passed to people like Diddy, who allegedly took advantage of them. I don't know, guys. Maybe the omission was likely to maintain a focused and legally sound narrative for the Netflix series, leaving out information considered too unclear or easily misinterpreted. But if I'm being honest, the things we've heard about what Bryshere allegedly went through are insane, y'all. See, previously, Jaguar said that she spoke to a number of artists that got invited to a party at Dwayne Wade's house, and she said that they told her everything was cool up front, but when they went to the back, there was a bunch of old dudes taking advantage of younger guys at the party.
Bryshere Gray left that house screaming. August the only one that stayed, and I guess he was really sick. He needed help.
Hey, man. Hey, man.
And that was they kids' friend.
She actually recently also doubled down on her claims and said that Will Smith was aware that young men in his care, including Bryshere Gray, August Alsina, and his own son, Jaden Smith, were allegedly being taken to Diddy to be turned out. She also expressed disappointment in Terrence Howard, noting that while he speaks out on many topics, he remained silent about what was happening to Bryshere Gray on the set of Empire, and said that if he had integrity, he would have stood in the gap for Bryshere. Y'all know that Bryshere Gray's career skyrocketed when he made made his debut on Empire as Hakeem Lyon, the youngest son of Lucius Lyon, played by Terrence Howard, and Cookie, played by Taraji P. Henson. Well, according to Jag, all the mistreatment started on the set of Empire, and if someone like Terrence really had the integrity he claims to have, he would not just sit there and watch what was happening to Bryshere. Now, I don't know about Terrence, but I know I've seen claims that Lee Daniels was heavily involved in whatever was going on.
In my eyes, he said, no coach, I'm gonna be his coach. And then I was like, yeah.
I was just determined you got that job.
See, Lee was the one who auditioned Bryshere, and he loved it and sent him to LA, where he auditioned with Taraji and Terrence. He actually loved Bryshere so much that he started mentoring him, and fans have always pointed out the weird interactions between him and Bryshere, like when he went to a Breakfast Club interview, where he made some pretty uncomfortable remarks about Bryshere. First of all, Lee Daniels talked about spending too much time with Bryshere and his son not liking it. Then people said that the way he clapped his hands in a spanking motion while saying "Yaz, Yaz, Yaz" in reference to Bryshere was terribly unsettling.
Talking about me, I gotta talk about Yaz too. Flip it over to Yaz. Yaz.
You don't get to talk to you too much,
Yaz. You don't talk to you too much?
I've also had stories about Charlie Mack and Will Smith's involvement, courtesy of Jaguar. Will Smith is actually one of the people who took Bryshere under his wing and supposedly mentored him, and he was talking about how Bryshere was surrounded by a whole lot of strength and he was surrounded by a whole lot of love. However, allegedly, Will Smith was doing more than just mentoring young Bryshere. In fact, according to Jaguar Wright and other people in the industry, both Will and Jada were very busy with the young talents they were supposedly mentoring. Well, based on reports, Bryshere has never gotten over all the things he went through, and according to what insiders have spilled, that's why he's been acting out in the last couple of years. Y'all remember in 2021, Bryshere pled guilty and was sentenced to spend 10 days in an Arizona county jail for DV against his wife. When the incident happened, the wife was treated and released for her non-life-threatening injuries, but based on police reports, she had numerous visible injuries on her body and also stated that she was strangled at one point by Bryshere and temporarily lost consciousness. And when Bryshere was being interrogated about what really happened, it became pretty clear that he wasn't doing okay mentally. Anyway, he's also been involved in other legal issues, like a lawsuit from his landlord, which said that they rented him a condo inside their 4-unit Chicago complex back in August 2019, and they claimed that, among other things, Bryshere left his dog inside the condo for extended periods of time. They claimed the dog was left unattended in common areas in the complex and urinated and defecated all over the place, which significantly damaged the hardwood floors, stairs, and other parts of the property. In addition, they said Bryshere jumped in and out of windows, clogged the toilets by flushing down condoms, smoked pot in places when smoking was not allowed under the lease, and engaged in unsanitary activity, including, but not limited to, eating breakfast in one of the bathrooms. Again, in November 2022, Bryshere was also arrested for violating his probation. Reportedly, cops were called by a woman claiming that she was dating him, and she told the officer that his behavior was escalating and she was concerned for her safety. The woman also claimed that Bryshere threw a box of food at her and pulled her hair. There was also a time he was accused of spitting on the floor of a 7-Eleven and throwing things at the cashier. And another time, he was also arrested for several driving offenses. And let me not even begin with him recently being involved in gay corn. That young man has clearly been through a lot. And basically what people like Jaguar are saying, it's because of what he went through in the hands of the people who were responsible for him, including his own mother. Allegedly. Well, people are saying that it doesn't make sense that some of these allegations were left out in the documentary. Honestly, when you step back and look at it, you have to wonder, what was the actual goal here? If you're making a definitive documentary about the reckoning of one of the most powerful men in music history, how do you accidentally leave out the people who owned the company and the people who were closest to him? The Clive Davis gap? Clive Davis owned 51% of Bad Boy. You can't tell the story of Diddy's power without talking about the person who gave it to him and stood by him for decades. Jay-Z, everyone knows how tight that circle was. To have him barely openly mentioned feels like the producers were walking on eggshells. Stevie J, Gene Deal, maybe these ones had issues with the production refusing to pay for footage or appearances, which led to significant materials being left on the cutting room floor. But if the explosive stories of what happened to people like Bryshere Gray were cut because they were too controversial, then was it ever really a documentary about the truth? Or just a safe recap of things we already saw on the news? What I know is that something needs to be done about Bryshere, because homeboy is losing it. But I'd also love to know your thoughts on the allegation by Jag that he was passed down to Diddy, and whether that should have been in the documentary, in the comments section below.